Okay, so let's finish the ratio test questions. Let's start with 2b. It's a sum from n equals 0 to infinity of n squared times 2 to the n plus 1 over 3 to the n. So again, we'll look at the n plus 1 term and the n term. So the limit as n goes to infinity from n equals 0 to infinity. I don't really need that anymore. It's really just the n plus 1 term. Okay, so we've got n plus 1 squared times 2. So now what's n plus 2? Over 3 to the n plus 1 divided by n squared times 2 to the n plus 1 over 3 to the n. Now dividing is, again, multiply by the reciprocal. N plus 1 squared times 2 to the n plus 2 over 3 to the n plus 1 times 3 to the n over n squared times 2 to the n plus 1. Now, if you're looking just across, this one's going to have one more 2. The denominator is going to have one more 3, and I'm going to pair my n terms together. So we've got 2/3. Then we have n plus 1 over n squared, or n plus 1 squared over n squared. This is going to go to 1, so this whole thing equals 2/3. So again, is that less than 1, equal to 1, or greater? If it's equal to 1, it's inconclusive, but if it's less than 1, this is absolutely convergent by the ratio test. So that one's not too bad. Let's look at C, which is the sum from n equals 1 to infinity of n to the n over n factorial. This one is a little harder because it requires you to have some understanding of some of these equations. So this is again going to be the limit as n goes to infinity of what we have, n plus 1 to the n plus 1 power over n factorial, or n plus 1 factorial, excuse me, over n to the n over n factorial, which of course, again, the division is always going to become multiplication. N plus 1 to the n plus 1 power over n plus 1 factorial times n factorial over n to the nth. Now, we talked about the factorial in the last video. N factorial divided by n plus 1 factorial. You can pull the n plus 1 out, and then the n factorial that remains will cancel. So we know that that part is 1 over n plus 1. I'm going to pull off an n plus 1 times n plus 1 to the n over n to the n. Now why am I going to do that? Because I have one extra term here, but it's also very convenient for what's about to happen here. You see the n plus 1 divided by n plus 1 will cancel, so this is really the limit as n goes to infinity of n plus 1 over n all to the nth power. Now, what's interesting here is, in the past, when we were to the first power squared, this became just 1, which was inconclusive. However, if I divide, n plus 1 divided by n is the same as 1 plus 1 over n to the n. We haven't talked about this much, but this is precisely, we solved this earlier using ln, like e and ln, but this is actually e. This is where e comes from. It's the limit of basically constant growth. So this is actually e, which is of course greater than 1. So what does that mean? This means this diverges by the ratio test. Now, can we talk about why that is? Okay, so what does n to the n mean versus n factorial? So n factorial would be like 7 factorial would be 7 times 6 times 5 all the way down. N to the n would be 7 times 7 times 7 all the way down. So while the numbers in n factorial are getting smaller each time, the numbers in n to the n are staying at the very biggest number possible. What's interesting is that the growth is increasing by approximately e each time. Now, of course, that means if you multiply by e every term, then terms are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. That's eventually going to be, it's infinitely larger, right? Because every term after that is just e bigger, so that means the term 4 after that would be e to the 4th bigger than the term you just had. Of course, that exponentials will get out of control quickly. But there's roughly a relationship for how much bigger the next term is compared to the first one. But either way, it will diverge by the ratio test. Now, I'm not going to do 2d, but a note on 2d. This is the absolute value of the terms, so you generally get to ignore the -1 to the n. So on that note, this is the end of the ratio test part 2 video, and we will do root test next, and it's going to be short on the root test. And the rest of the notes after that are practice with all the tests, so it'll just be one video on root test.